So our last topic here in this section is about human digestion, human nutrition. So when we talked about the other organisms, we talked about intracellular digestion versus extracellular digestion. What do humans have? What do humans use? Extracellular digestion. Okay. Because the foods that we eat, the foods that we break down, they're never inside of our cells until they've been digested. So humans have extracellular digestion.
What is the point of having Han Solo in the top right corner?
Just we always have a picture of the organism we're talking about.
He's not even human.
Figure us what if they are humans and
They aren't
live
humans.
in another place.
Maybe they are. All right. So humans, similar to some of the other organisms we study, like the earthworm or the grasshopper, have a one-way gastrointestinal tract called the Alimentary Canal. Okay? And the nutrients we need from our foods include things you're familiar with: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, water, vitamins, minerals. And the way that food moves through the entire digestive system is through a process that's called peristalsis. And peristalsis is basically the contraction, the rhythmic contraction of the smooth muscle that lines our gastrointestinal cavity and basically just squeezes the food along. You can think of it as squeezing the toothpaste out of a tube. Okay, that the muscles, they're sort of these ring-like, smooth, involuntary muscles. And they contract one after the other, and as they do that, they can move this food along the digestive tract. That's what peristalsis is, gastrointestinal. So this just contracts on one ring of muscle, and then the one below it, and the one below it, and it basically just squeezes that food along. The food that you swallow, it's called a bolus, as it moves through the esophagus until it gets digested, broken down, liquefied into what we call chyme. Here we have, many of the organs of the digestive system. We'll talk about some of the major ones, because in the digestive system there are organs in which food travels through, but then there are other accessory organs which the food doesn't actually go through, but add various enzymes and so forth to the food as it's being digested. So digestion begins in the mouth, and mouth is also called the oral cavity, and this is how we ingest food. So obviously we ingest food in our mouth, we chew it, and this is a form of mechanical digestion. Taking large amounts of food, breaking them into smaller pieces, and in doing so, increasing the surface area on which digestive enzymes can act. Chemical digestion also can begin in the mouth. Because our salivary glands release enzymes, water, mucus, that begin to digest polysaccharides, starches. A salivary amylase is an enzyme that takes large starch molecules, breaks them up into simpler molecules, disaccharides, monosaccharides, so it begins the digestion process. And our salivary glands are located up in our mouth area. The little tubes, they squirt saliva into our mouth at the appropriate times. Although sometimes they squirt saliva when you're yawning or something, and you get a little spray of, you ever like reading a book or something and you like yawn, and all of a sudden there's a little spray of something on your book. That's from your salivary glands. Your salivary glands happen to spray some saliva out while your mouth was open. Your mouth watering, if you like think about food or you're really hungry and you smell food, your mouth starts to water. That's your salivary glands getting ready for you to ingest some food. If you are going to vomit, and you get that watery feeling in your mouth that like, oh, I need to get to the bathroom pretty quick. Again, it's your salivary glands are releasing that saliva, helping to lubricate your mouth because that food's going to come pouring out pretty soon. So your body responds and produces that saliva at the right time. After when we swallow our food from our saliva, it moves into the background of pharynx, is sort of your throat area, and then moves down our esophagus. Esophagus is basically just a passageway. There's no digestion happens. Food moves through our esophagus pretty quickly. Okay. Moves through peristalsis. When you swallow, your muscles are contracting from the top down, okay, and squeezing whatever you swallowed down into your stomach. It's about a foot long or so. Basically just getting the food from your mouth into your stomach. And when it gets to the stomach, that's where digestion of proteins begins. Food stays in your stomach for a while. Depends on the type of food, 2 to 6 hours maybe. Depends on how quickly it's being digested, how much food there is, and so forth. And in your stomach is a mixture of many different enzymes, of hydrochloric acid, which all act to start the breakdown of the foods that we eat. And these mixture of fluids are called gastric juices, and it turns the food from solid form that you swallowed into a thin, soupy liquid we call chyme, is the term for the liquefied foods that we eat. And our stomach can expand quite a bit. Okay, it expands and contracts depending on whether we've eaten or not. Okay, there's hormones that are released into our blood that respond when we do swallow food, that our stomach can expand to accommodate that food. As it's digested, then it can contract again. And that hormone's called gastrin. It also stimulates, once food goes in our stomach distends, and then that signals our body to start producing more of the digestive enzymes to break down those foods. And those enzymes, gastric protease, which breaks down what? Proteins. Breaks down proteins in our stomach. There's also very strong acid. The conditions within our stomach are very acidic, pH of 1.5 to 2.5, produced by hydrochloric acid that our stomach secretes through pyloric glands. But our stomach is protected. That's a very acidic condition. That would be damaging to most tissue. But our stomach has mucus and a lining that is resistant to that hydrochloric acid so that our stomach is not damaged. But there are times when it can be damaged. So sometimes that lining of the stomach starts to break down, that protective layer sort of wears away in certain instances, and then those strong acids and enzymes can start to actually break down our stomach lining itself. And that's what an ulcer is. So if you've heard of people having an ulcer, it's damage to the lining of the stomach caused by these acids. Heartburn, for example, is another ailment that's caused by the stomach acid. In this case, it's when hydrochloric acid from your stomach creeps up into your esophagus. And when it does, it damages the lining of your esophagus. It burns, it hurts. Doesn't have anything to do with your actual heart, but you can take different medications. I take medication every day that reduces the amount of acidity in my stomach because I used to get heartburn all the time, and I used to take Tums all the time. When you take something like Tums or Pepto-Bismol or something like that, if you had heartburn, it's basically just a basic solution. And when you ingest it, it neutralizes some of the acid in your stomach and your esophagus, and it helps you feel better. It's really, if a person gets heartburn constantly, it's really not very good. Not because it's just uncomfortable, but it also damages the esophagus, which can lead eventually to esophageal cancer. So when a person has heartburn repeatedly, they usually want to give them something that will prevent it, rather than just taking something like Tums every day to alleviate the symptoms. There are muscles at the entryway into the stomach and the exit of the stomach into the small intestine that open and close to accommodate foods. And they're called sphincters. So a sphincter is a ring-like muscle that can basically open and close. Okay, that they can expand to allow food to enter the stomach, and then they could close up to stop food from going to the stomach. The one at the top of the stomach, where the esophagus meets the stomach, is called the cardiac sphincter, controls food entering. Okay, and the pyloric sphincter is the one at the end of the stomach that leads into the small intestine. So there are different times when these don't open and close properly. For example, if the cardiac sphincter stays open too long, that can allow foods to come back up the esophagus. It can allow stomach acid to come up the esophagus if it's not closing fully. Okay? The pyloric sphincter keeps food in the stomach until it's fully digested enough. Then it opens up and allows the food to move on from the stomach into the small intestine. Oh, got some things I left out there. So, gastric juices is the name of the various mixtures that are secreted into the stomach by gastric glands. And the specific name of the enzyme released into our stomach that breaks down proteins, this gastric protease, is called pepsin. So a few things here in these diagrams. Again, we start in the mouth. Okay, is we have the salivary glands are located up sort of behind your mouth area. Okay, some underneath your tongue, and then they have passageways, ducts, which then lead into they're called salivary ducts, which lead into your mouth where that saliva sprays out of. Okay, you have mouth, okay, the throat, which is called the pharynx, is the technical term for it, leading down the esophagus into the stomach here. Okay. Again, you see another diagram here of the stomach. This would be the esophagus. And this is the cardiac sphincter, which opens and closes, allowing food in. You have the stomach. Okay. And then you have the pyloric sphincter, which keeps the food in the stomach until it's ready to be moved on to the small intestine. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. Again, you see another diagram here. The lining of the stomach, it's very muscular. Okay, it has all these ridges in it, covered in mucus, so that it's not damaged by the stomach acids. But sometimes it is, like we said. This is a gastric ulcer. It's an ulcer in the actual stomach because of the acids eating away at that lining. Okay? Or you could also get an ulcer in the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, and that's a duodeneal ulcer. Okay. Here's some actual images of what those ulcers look like. This is the damage to the small intestine. Here is the damage to the stomach. These are taken via endoscopy. An endoscopy is when a doctor puts basically a small camera down your esophagus, into your stomach and your esophagus, and they sometimes use that to diagnose different problems a person might have with their digestive system, to see if there's damage to the esophagus, to see if there are ulcers, to see those sorts of things. They do that with an endoscopy. The opposite sort of thing is called a colonoscopy, which is when they use the same sort of tools, but instead they go through the rectum and they can look at the large intestine using those same types of fiber optic cameras to see if there's any signs of colon cancer, is a fairly common type of cancer, or to see if there's any other colitis or other issues of the large intestine.
An ulcer can cause you to vomit blood, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if that damage goes into the tissue of the stomach, it can lead to bleeding. Yeah.
How do they make it so you don't throw up when you put the camera?
You're sedated. You're basically unconscious-ish, and so you just lay there and they put it down your throat.
Like when they put you to sleep, like what causes you not like to wake up? Like
Just the various mixture of anesthetics that they give you. And if you've ever had surgery, I mean, I had surgery on my appendix, and it's when you are knocked out completely and unconscious, it's like no time has passed. Like you get the anesthetic and you're whatever counting backwards from 3 down to 1, and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's 2 hours later, and it's not like you're sleeping. You know, when you're sleeping, like you have some sort of sense that time has passed. When you get anesthetized for surgery, that doesn't happen. It's like that time is just like gone, and you just woke up right away.
Well, that's weird. So like time could pass like 500 years.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the small intestine. So the small intestine is called small intestine because it is narrower, but it's actually much longer than the large intestine. Okay, it's about 18 to 23 feet long. Okay, and this is where most chemical digestion takes place, and basically all of the absorption of nutrients happen in the small intestine. There are many glands that secrete a variety of enzymes into the small intestine. Remember, enzymes are specific, so we need a whole host of enzymes to break down all the various types of things that we eat in our diet. Okay, there's proteases, like trypsin is the name of one, lipase, which breaks down fat, disaccharidases, which break down disaccharides. You know, there's a whole host of these enzymes that are necessary. There's also a substance called bile that's important. And bile is, I don't want that picture yet. Bile is produced in the liver. Okay, it is sort of a greenish substance. And the liver then sends it off to the gallbladder where it's stored. Okay? And then when a person then eats, the gallbladder releases that bile into the small intestine through a tube. It's called the bile duct. But sometimes people develop hardened components of the bile. Cholesterol is usually one of the main ones. And as these little secretions build up and solidify, they can form larger, what are called gallstones. And they're very, very painful as they are in your gallbladder. If they start moving through the bile duct, they cause a lot of pain. They cause difficulty in digestion. They can block the release of bile into the small intestine. So sometimes people have their gallbladder removed if it's causing them problems, if they're having attacks of the gallbladder. And then it's okay to have it removed because then your liver, it can secrete bile directly into the small intestine. And what bile is, it's an emulsifier. It breaks down fats into these small little droplets, increasing their surface area so they can be absorbed later on. It's also basic in terms of its pH, so it also helps neutralize those acids that are coming in from the stomach. They get neutralized in the small intestine back to a much more neutral pH. This is a picture of a person's gallbladder that's been completely clogged up with gallstones. They're hard, they're like little pebbles that are stuck in the gallbladder. So obviously the gallbladder couldn't then release any bile into the small intestine, and I'm sure this would be very painful for a person. Pancreatic juices are another type of digestive enzyme. They're produced obviously in the pancreas, and then they're sent into the small intestine through the pancreatic duct, which carries them there. They contain a bunch of enzymes, lipases, amylase, proteases, okay, sodium bicarbonate. What do you think that does? It's not an enzyme. Sodium bicarbonate. It neutralizes the stomach acid. Don't forget your coloring for tomorrow, and we'll be finishing up with these notes tomorrow as well.